I accidentally spoke my mind about her figure. Her response left me speechless. Deathworld. Legends. The planet stretched out before Elia's ward like nothing he had ever seen before. Jagged cliffs rose from the crimson soil, their peaks piercing the dusty, copper-colored sky. Twisting, blackened trees clung to the rocky terrain, as if refusing to surrender to the harsh winds that swept constantly across the surface. Strange, humming currents of energy drifted lazily above the ground, occasionally sparking and crackling in the faint light of the alien sun. This world, a death world in every sense, was notorious across galaxies. Only the strongest, most prepared, and most cunning could survive here. Elias had been sent with a small human expedition team to chart the planet's resources and explore the ruins of an ancient civilization rumored to lie hidden somewhere beneath the jagged hills. He had faced dangerous worlds before, but even he felt a thrill of nervous excitement as his boots crunched against the rough terrain. The air was thick with a tang of minerals, and the faint scent of ozone lingered from the electric storms that raged unpredictably across the landscape. Survival here would not just test the body, it would challenge the mind and the spirit. The first few days were exhausting. The human team moved carefully, constantly scanning for predators, sudden landslides, or hidden crevices that could swallow a person whole. Elias, as captain, often led the way, relying on his experience, instincts, and a little luck to keep the group safe. But he also had to balance caution with speed. The longer they stayed exposed in this world, the greater the risk of encountering something they could not handle. It was during one of these reconnaissance trips that Elias first saw her. She was perched on a rocky outcrop far above the team's path, her silhouette sharp against the fading light of the twin suns. At first, Elias thought she was another predator, or perhaps a mirage conjured by the alien heat waves. But as he squinted and adjusted the lens of his binoculars, he realized she was something else entirely. Her figure was lean and perfectly balanced, moving with a grace that no predator he had ever encountered possessed. Every motion was precise, deliberate, as if the wind itself obeyed her commands. She was scanning the same terrain as he was, though her eyes, large, multifaceted, and glowing faintly, hinted at a species unfamiliar to him. Elias felt a strange mixture of awe and apprehension. He had heard legends of Lyra, a warrior alien renowned across multiple star systems for her unmatched agility and combat skill. Her people were said to be fierce hunters and survivors, living on some of the most dangerous planets known to explorers. But no one he had met ever claimed to have seen her up close. And now, here she was, real and alive, standing on the edge of a cliff on a planet that could kill him in 100 different ways. The team paused, unsure of what to do. Elias motioned them to stay low, crouching behind a jagged rock formation. The air between them and her seemed charged, tense, as if both parties instinctively understood the danger of revealing themselves too soon. But Elias, curious and impulsive as ever, couldn't resist observing her closely. Her movements fascinated him. She adjusted her stance to shift her weight effortlessly on the uneven stone. When she crouched to examine something, her muscles flexed like a perfectly tuned machine. Even in that moment, she exuded both power and elegance. Without thinking, Elias muttered under his breath, "Her figure, it's incredible." The words hung in the air longer than he expected. He immediately regretted them, realizing how foolish it sounded. Commenting on an alien's figure, especially one as lethal and renowned as Lyra, could be interpreted in any number of ways, none of them positive. He could feel his face heating, though no one on his team could hear him. And then it happened. Lyra turned her head almost imperceptibly and fixed her glowing eyes directly on him. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Elias froze, unsure if she had heard him or was simply scanning the terrain. Then ever so subtly, the corner of her mouth twitched into a small, knowing smile. She raised a single eyebrow, the gesture so slight yet so precise that Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He could not read her expression. Was she angry, amused, curious, respectful? Or had she not noticed his remark at all? His mind raced, calculating every possible outcome. He had faced merciless alien predators, rogue mercenaries, and environmental hazards that could tear a man apart, yet nothing had made him feel as exposed as those few seconds under her gaze. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying clearly despite the distance. It was melodic, strong, and commanding. "Observant," she said simply, almost teasingly. "You notice what others ignore." Elias blinked. That was not what he had expected. His mouth went dry as he struggled to find words. Yes, I mean, no offense," he stammered, trying to salvage his dignity. Her smile widened just a fraction, enough to make him feel as though he had just been evaluated and passed an invisible test. "Be careful with your words, human," she said, her tone shifting slightly to a mix of amusement and warning. "Strength and skill define me, not appearances. But honesty is rare." He nodded, trying to regain composure. Somehow he felt relieved, though he was also acutely aware that he had just stepped into a dance he barely understood. Lyra's words carried weight, not just as a warning, but as a statement. She valued truth and courage, and she had recognized both in his unthinking remark. Over the next few hours, the human team and Lyra kept their distance but remained aware of each other. Elias' mind, however, could not stop returning to her. She moved with a confidence and precision that made even the rugged Deathworld terrain seem tame. Her form, once the subject of his careless comment, now represented something far greater: resilience, skill, and control over an environment that killed so many without thought. As night fell, the temperature dropped drastically, and strange bioluminescent plants began to glow faintly, casting eerie shadows across the rocks. Elias' team made camp near a small cave, its entrance hidden behind twisted vegetation. He kept his eyes on the horizon, knowing Lyra was still out there somewhere, moving silently and watching. Sitting by the flickering fire, Elias reflected on the encounter. His initial words had been careless, impulsive, and entirely human. Yet in response, he had received something unexpected: acknowledgement, not insult; curiosity, not anger. He realized that in a world like this, honesty was far more valuable than flattery or lies. The night was long and filled with strange sounds: the distant roar of unseen predators, the sharp crackle of alien energy currents, and the whisper of wind across the rocky cliffs. Elias thought of Lyra often, wondering how she survived here alone, why she watched him, and what her smile truly meant. He sensed that she was a test, a challenge not just of skill but of understanding. When the suns rose again, painting the Deathworld in hues of molten gold and red, Elias knew he had to approach the day differently. Survival would demand focus, agility, and creativity, but interacting with Lyra would demand something more: respect, awareness, and perhaps a hint of bravery he had not yet fully explored. As they prepared to move, Elias caught a final glimpse of her on a distant ridge. She was watching him again, her stance relaxed but ready. And for the first time, Elias felt not fear, but a spark of excitement, a promise that this encounter could change everything he thought he knew about the galaxy, alien cultures, and even himself. He squared his shoulders, tightened his grip on his climbing tools, and took a deep breath. Whatever lay ahead, whatever dangers this Deathworld held, he knew one thing: the journey had already begun, and it would be unlike anything he had ever experienced. And somewhere on the cliffs above, Lyra watched him, aware that this human was not like the others. Perhaps he had the courage, ingenuity, and heart to survive not just the Deathworld, but the trials she would inevitably place before him. Elias didn't yet understand the full meaning of that moment, but he would soon learn. On a planet where death waited at every turn, the smallest spark of understanding could become the difference between life and oblivion. and the bond between human and alien could redefine the course of legends. The next morning, Elias awoke to a cold, sharp wind that swept across the jagged cliffs and hollowed valleys of the Deathworld. The twin suns had barely risen, casting long shadows across the rough terrain, and the faint hum of the planet's energy currents filled the air. Despite the chill, he felt a renewed sense of determination. Yesterday's encounter with Lyra lingered in his mind, and he realized that surviving this world would be more than a test of skill. It would also be a test of understanding and trust. The team moved carefully, climbing down a steep slope to reach a narrow canyon that twisted like a serpent across the planet's surface. Elias led the way, scanning for unstable rock, hidden predators, and signs of the ancient civilization rumored to be buried beneath the cliffs. His human instincts, honed through years of exploring dangerous planets, guided every step. But the presence of Lyra added an unfamiliar tension. She moved like a shadow along the ridges above them, always just out of reach, observing silently. Elias could feel her gaze even when he could not see her, a constant reminder that he was not alone in this world. By midday, the heat of the twin suns had begun to bake the canyon floor. Elias paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and surveyed the narrow walls around him. Strange markings etched into the stone caught his attention, symbols that hinted at an intelligent culture long gone. He knelt to examine them, carefully brushing away the red dust. The symbols were intricate, almost alive with meaning, and he felt a shiver of excitement. The discovery was important, but the presence of Lyra made it even more thrilling. She could have struck at any moment, yet she remained distant, watching and waiting. "What do you think they mean?" asked Lieutenant Mara, his second-in-command, her voice cautious but curious. "They're not just decorations," Elias replied. "These are warnings or instructions, maybe both. This civilization was advanced, but something forced them to disappear. We need to be careful." He looked up instinctively, scanning the ridges above. Lyra had shifted slightly, her silhouette blending perfectly with the rocky cliffs. Her movement was fluid, graceful, and precise, like a dancer navigating invisible obstacles. Elias felt his earlier comment about her figure return to his mind, but now it carried a new meaning. It was not about appearance, it was about the perfect harmony of her body and mind in a world designed to kill. Every motion was efficiency, strength, and survival combined. Hours passed, and the canyon gradually narrowed, forcing the team to move single file. The heat was relentless, and the rocks radiated energy that made the soles of their boots burn. Elias kept glancing at Lyra, trying to understand her methods. She made no unnecessary movements, no noise, yet she remained aware of every detail. Her presence was a constant reminder of what it meant to survive here. As the sun reached its zenith, the first warning signs appeared. Deep scratches in the stone, claw marks too large to belong to any known creature, and faint tracks that indicated something massive had passed through recently. Elias felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. The team was skilled, but even they could be caught off guard on this planet. "Stay alert," he said quietly. "We're not alone." Lyra's voice came from above, calm but commanding. "You are correct, human. Something is following you. Stay focused or it will make you its prey." Elias swallowed, feeling a mix of relief and unease. She was providing valuable information without interfering directly, a perfect balance of observation and guidance. He realized that earning her trust would require more than courage. It would require understanding, respect, and quick thinking. They continued along the canyon, and the terrain became increasingly treacherous. Sharp rocks jutted out like jagged teeth, and sudden drops threatened to end their journey in an instant. Elias relied on his climbing tools and instincts, leading the team through a series of narrow passes and unstable slopes. Each step required precision, yet Lyra's presence above seemed to make everything easier. She adjusted her position with minimal effort, sometimes subtly indicating safer routes with a flick of her hand or a shift in her stance. During a brief rest, Elias crouched near a boulder, studying the alien markings more closely. He traced the patterns with his fingers, trying to decipher their meaning. "These symbols, they're not just warnings," he muttered. "They might be directions, a map of some kind." Mara leaned over, curious. "A map? To what?" Elias shook his head. "I don't know yet, but whatever it leads to, it's important. That civilization wasn't just advanced, they were survivors, and they left this for someone who could understand it." Lyra dropped silently to the canyon floor, her landing precise and controlled. Elias startled, not expecting her so close. She regarded him with those glowing eyes, and for a moment, the harshness of the death world faded into the background. Her gaze was intense, measuring, but not hostile. "You understand more than most," she said softly. "Few humans would notice these details. You have potential." Elias blinked. "Potential for what?" "For survival, for understanding." "For partnership," she said, her tone unreadable but meaningful. He felt a strange warmth, not physical but emotional. In a world where danger lurked around every corner, where death was common and mercy rare, Lyra's words carried weight. Partnership with someone like her was not just an honor, it was a survival advantage. The team pressed on, following the faint trail of the ancient civilization's markers. As they moved deeper into the canyon, the air grew heavier, and strange sounds echoed off the stone walls. Low rumbles, distant screeches, and the soft shifting of rocks reminded them that they were not the only living creatures on the planet. Suddenly, the ground beneath Elias' foot gave way slightly. He tumbled forward but caught himself on the edge of a boulder, heart pounding. Lyra was there instantly, her hand gripping his wrist and pulling him upright before he could fall completely. Her strength was astonishing, but it was her precision, timing, and calm presence that struck him most. "Careful," she said simply. "This world tests those who hesitate. Hesitation can be fatal." Elias nodded, swallowing his fear. He realized that surviving here required more than skill. It required awareness, adaptability, and courage in equal measure, and Lyra embodied all three perfectly. As they moved further, the canyon opened into a narrow valley filled with bioluminescent plants. The soft glow illuminated jagged stones and deep fissures, casting eerie shadows. Elias could see the tracks of massive creatures leading into the valley, and he felt a renewed sense of urgency. Survival depended on constant attention and quick decisions. Lyra moved ahead with him, guiding silently and efficiently. Her movements were almost hypnotic, a perfect combination of grace and practicality. Elias found himself learning from her, noticing patterns, adjusting his own steps, and anticipating hazards before they appeared. Her influence was subtle but undeniable. By late afternoon, they reached a clearing where the ruins of an ancient structure emerged from the ground. Crumbling walls, carved with symbols and patterns similar to those in the canyon, hinted at a civilization both intelligent and resourceful. Elias' pulse quickened. This was the discovery they had been seeking, and perhaps the key to understanding the Deathworld itself. Lyra crouched near the entrance, examining the carvings with meticulous care. Elias approached, noting the combination of artistry and utility in the designs. The symbols were not random. They were instructions, warnings, and perhaps even a form of communication meant to guide the worthy. "Look at this," Elias said, pointing to a sequence of markings. "It seems to describe traps or mechanisms." Whoever built this was not just thinking of survival, they were thinking of defense. Lyra nodded. "Correct. These structures were designed to protect, to challenge, and to test those who enter. Only the capable can proceed without harm." Elias felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The challenges ahead would be greater than anything he had faced so far. But for the first time, he also felt a sense of confidence. With Lyra by his side, he had an ally who understood this world, who could anticipate dangers he could not. As night fell, the valley glowed softly under the light of the bioluminescent plants. Elias and Lyra made a small camp near the ruins, using portable shields to protect against the planet's frequent energy surges. The human team settled nearby, exhausted but eager to explore the structure in the morning. Elias sat quietly, watching Lyra move through the shadows with silent efficiency. He realized that his initial remark about her figure had been naive and impulsive. Now he understood that her form represented far more than appearance. It represented survival, skill, and the ability to adapt perfectly to the harshest conditions imaginable. For hours, he considered the lessons of the day. Honesty, observation, respect, and courage had proven invaluable. In a world designed to kill the unprepared, these traits were as important as any weapon or tool. And Lyra, in her calm, precise way, had shown him that these qualities were recognized, respected, and rewarded. When sleep finally claimed him, Elias felt a quiet determination settle in his chest. The death world was unforgiving, but it had also offered him a glimpse of something extraordinary, a chance to understand, to learn, and perhaps to form a bond that transcended species and danger alike. Above him, Lyra stood silently on a ridge, her glowing eyes scanning the horizon. She had tested him, observed him, and noted his potential. The journey ahead would be filled with peril, but she sensed that this human was more than ordinary. He had curiosity, ingenuity, and courage, the qualities necessary not just to survive, but to thrive in a world that demanded perfection. Elias slept, unaware of the challenges that awaited but prepared in spirit. The death world was a harsh teacher, and Lyra, its silent guide, had already begun imparting lessons that would shape not only his survival, but the story of legends that would follow. The morning air on the death world was crisp and sharp, carrying the faint scent of minerals and something darker, something alive moving unseen. Elias awoke to the soft hum of energy currents drifting across the valley, their faint sparks lighting the edges of the ancient ruins they had made camp near. The ruins were massive, carved from black stone that glinted faintly in the early light, and the symbols etched into every surface hinted at both intelligence and danger. Lyra was already moving, her steps silent, precise, like a shadow sliding across the ground. She paused at the edge of the clearing, scanning the horizon with glowing eyes, her posture alert but calm. Elias admired her without thinking, remembering how clumsy and impulsive he had been when he first spoke his thoughts about her figure. Now he understood that her strength, precision, and awareness were far more remarkable than any physical appearance. Her figure was not something to comment on. It was a weapon, a tool, and a testament to survival on a planet designed to destroy the weak. "Move carefully today," she said, her voice low but carrying authority. "There are predators here that do not announce themselves. You must not underestimate them." Elias nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The death world had already tested his team in countless ways, but he sensed that today would be different. He could feel the tension in the air, the almost imperceptible vibrations in the ground, and the faint scent of something enormous moving just beyond their line of sight. The team began their exploration cautiously, following a narrow path that led deeper into the ruins. The stone walls rose high on either side, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to tell stories of battles, survival, and loss. Elias traced the lines with his fingers as they passed, imagining the hands that had crafted them. He felt a strange connection to a civilization long gone, as if their lessons had been left behind for someone strong enough to understand. Hours passed with no sign of immediate danger. The sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the ruins and illuminating the valley below. Elias' attention was constantly divided between observing the ruins and monitoring the team's movements. Every sound, every shift in the wind made him tense. Survival here was never guaranteed. Then, without warning, the ground trembled. A low, guttural growl echoed through the canyon walls, vibrating in Elia's chest. He froze, scanning the area, and then he saw it. A massive predator emerging from the shadows, its scales glinting with a metallic sheen. It was larger than any creature he had ever encountered, with claws that could tear through stone and eyes that glowed faintly red in the dim light. Its presence was both terrifying and mesmerizing. "Get back!" Elias shouted, drawing the team together. Lyra moved instantly, sliding down the cliffside with astonishing speed. She landed silently in front of him, a perfect barrier between the predator and the humans. Her posture was calm but ready, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. Elias had seen her move before, but now he understood the full extent of her skill. This was no ordinary warrior. This was someone who could survive anything. The predator advanced, its movements deliberate, testing the humans and their ally. Elias noticed its claws left deep gouges in the stone with every step. The air was thick with tension, and he felt his heart pound as he realized the danger. If the creature attacked without warning, the team could be wiped out in moments. "Spread out," Lyra commanded, her voice sharp. "Use the terrain, don't corner yourselves. The creature is smart but predictable if you think carefully." Elias moved quickly, directing his team to use rocks and fallen debris as cover. He grabbed his scanning equipment, trying to analyze the predator's movements. Lyra's eyes followed every twitch of the creature, anticipating its strikes and guiding the humans with subtle gestures. For a moment, Elias marveled at her. She was more than a warrior. She was a living embodiment of survival on a planet that had no mercy. The predator lunged suddenly, and Elias reacted instinctively, rolling to the side and narrowly avoiding a swipe that would have torn him apart. Lyra leaped, striking the creature with precise blows that caused it to hesitate but not retreat. Her movements were a perfect blend of strength and strategy, each motion calculated to test the predator's limits without overcommitting. Elias realized something important in that moment. Survival here was not about brute force. It was about observation, timing, and understanding, and Lyra had mastered all three. He began to mirror her approach, watching the creature closely, predicting its movements, and using the terrain to his advantage. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of tension, strategy, and calculated strikes. The predator was relentless, but Elias and Lyra worked in unison. She would draw its attention, moving with agility and precision, while Elias used quick thinking to set traps and manipulate the environment. Together, they became a seamless unit, blending human ingenuity with alien skill. Finally, Elias saw an opening. He directed the team to lure the creature toward a narrow canyon passage. The walls were close enough that the predator could not maneuver, and he hoped it would be trapped. Lyra moved to position herself strategically, her movements silent and controlled. The predator charged, and with a final push, Elias triggered a series of rocks to collapse behind it, blocking its retreat. The massive creature roared in frustration, trapped and unable to move freely. Breathing heavily, Elias lowered his equipment. The team gathered around, their faces pale but filled with awe. We did it," one of the soldiers whispered. Lyra remained calm, standing slightly apart, her glowing eyes still on the predator. "You did well," she said, her voice almost approving. "But remember, survival is not about defeating a single creature. This planet tests every skill, every choice, every instinct. One mistake and you will not live to see the sun rise." Elias nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The encounter had been dangerous, but it had also been a lesson. He had witnessed her skill, learned from her strategy, and realized that human ingenuity paired with trust and observation could overcome even the deadliest predator. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon, Elias and Lyra gathered the team near the ruins. They needed rest, but he could not stop thinking about the predator. He studied its tracks, its markings on the stone, and considered how it had moved. Each detail was a lesson in survival, a puzzle that he had helped solve with the guidance of an alien warrior who had once been a stranger, but now felt like a mentor. Later that evening, around the small campfire, Elias reflected on the day's events. Lyra sat nearby, her posture relaxed but alert. She had remained quiet for hours, observing, occasionally making small adjustments to the team's camp setup to ensure safety. Her actions were deliberate, precise, and efficient. He realized that his earlier comment about her figure had been childish and naive. Now, he understood that her strength, skill, and presence were far more significant. Her figure represented mastery over the environment, a perfect combination of agility, precision, and survival instinct. "You have improved today," she said finally, breaking the silence. "You watched, learned, and acted. Most humans would have panicked, but you adapted. That is what sets you apart." Elias felt a mix of pride and humility. He had survived, yes, but he had also learned from her in ways he could not have imagined. He realized that true survival required more than strength. It required observation, patience, and the courage to act decisively when the moment demanded. The team slept fitfully, aware that danger still lurked nearby, but Elias felt a quiet confidence. They had survived the predator, learned from it, and formed a bond with Lyra that went beyond words. In a world that could kill in an instant, that bond was more valuable than any weapon or tool. Before he slept, Elias took one last look at Lyra. She stood on a ridge, her silhouette illuminated by the bioluminescent glow of the valley. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, alert and unwavering. He felt a deep respect for her, not just as a warrior, but as a being who had mastered survival in a world designed to destroy the unprepared. He realized that the journey ahead would be filled with even greater challenges, but for the first time, he felt ready. With Lyra's guidance and his own human ingenuity, he believed they could overcome anything this death world threw at them. The predator had been a test, and they had passed. As the night deepened, the valley was quiet except for the soft hum of energy currents and the distant cries of unseen creatures. Elias drifted into a cautious sleep, aware that tomorrow would bring new trials, new discoveries, and perhaps even greater dangers. But he also knew something vital. He had learned to watch, to think, and to trust. And in a world where one mistake could mean death, those skills were worth more than any weapon, any technology, or any plan. Lyra, watching him from above, understood the significance as well. This human had potential, yes, but more than that. He had courage, adaptability, and a willingness to learn. Qualities that could survive on a death world, qualities that could survive across galaxies. And so the first real test of their partnership ended not with death, but with understanding, respect, and the quiet satisfaction of survival. Elias knew that the predator was only the beginning, and that the death world held many more lessons, but with Lyra by his side, he was determined to face them all. The sun had barely risen over the jagged cliffs of the death world when Elias stirred, his muscles sore but his mind sharp. The encounter with the predator had tested every ounce of his skill and courage, yet the planet still held dangers he had only begun to understand. As he stepped out of the makeshift shelter, the air felt electric, charged with energy currents that hummed faintly across the rocky terrain. The ruins they had discovered the previous day loomed nearby, their walls etched with symbols that seemed to shift subtly in the dim morning light. Lyra was already moving, her presence silent but commanding. She adjusted her stance on the ridge above, scanning the valley below with those glowing eyes that seemed to see everything. Elias watched her for a moment, marveling at the way she moved with precision and grace, each action purposeful and efficient. He remembered his careless comment from earlier days about her figure, and he felt a quiet humility. That remark had been naive, But now he understood that her form represented something far greater: mastery, survival, and skill honed by a life on the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. "Elias," she called softly, her voice carrying down to him without urgency. "The ruins hide more than stone. Be cautious. Others have come before and not all survived." He nodded, understanding immediately. The predator had been only a first test. Now they were moving deeper into the unknown, into the heart of a civilization that had clearly mastered both survival and defense. Every step required attention, ingenuity, and trust, not only in his own abilities but also in Lyra's guidance. The human team followed behind him, alert and tense. Their journey took them through narrow corridors carved into the cliffs, passages that twisted and sloped unpredictably. Strange markings glowed faintly in some places, revealing patterns that suggested mechanisms or traps. Elias paused frequently, using his tools to probe the stone and decipher the symbols. Lyra moved alongside him silently, observing his approach, occasionally nodding or gesturing to indicate a safer route. Hours passed in careful exploration. Elias was constantly aware of the potential for danger, both environmental and sentient. The ruins were vast, a network of chambers, corridors, and hidden openings that suggested intelligence and strategy beyond what most civilizations possessed. Every doorway, every carved symbol, told a story, and Elias felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. They were uncovering something extraordinary, but the planet demanded respect. It was during one such passage that they first heard the sounds, faint mechanical hums beneath the stone floor. The vibrations were subtle at first, almost like a heartbeat, but Elias recognized the rhythm as unnatural. Lyra's eyes narrowed, her focus sharpening. "Traps," she said softly, "or guardians. Some structures are protected. You must not trigger them." Elias nodded. Carefully, he scanned the floor for pressure plates or hidden mechanisms. His training on dangerous worlds had prepared him for hazards, but the ruins presented challenges unlike any he had faced. Every decision carried consequences, and one wrong move could trigger destruction. As they progressed, the hums grew louder, resonating through the stone. Then, without warning, a series of metallic panels slid open along the walls, revealing automated defense drones. Their design was both elegant and lethal: sleek, multi-limbed constructs capable of rapid movement and precise targeting. Elias froze for a moment, assessing the threat. Lyra, however, moved instantly, her body a blur of speed and precision as she neutralized the first drone with a single, calculated strike. "Take cover," she shouted. Elias and the team dove behind stone pillars, watching as Lyra continued to move with effortless control. She struck, dodged, and redirected the drones with uncanny timing. Elias realized that she was not only skilled in combat but had an intuitive understanding of technology, able to predict the drones' movements and weaknesses almost instinctively. Using this brief window, Elias formulated a plan. He instructed the team to set traps along narrow corridors, funneling the drones into positions where they could be contained or disabled. Working together, human ingenuity and Lyra's skill began to overwhelm the automated guardians. Each action required focus, timing, and trust. When a drone lunged unexpectedly, Lyra would redirect it with precise force, allowing Elias to disable its control panel. Step by step, they cleared the chamber, moving deeper into the heart of the ruins. When the last drone fell, Elias exhaled heavily, feeling the adrenaline slowly leave his body. He looked at Lyra, her stance calm and controlled despite the intensity of the encounter. "I thank you," he said sincerely. "I couldn't have done this without you." She tilted her head slightly, her glowing eyes meeting his. "You adapted well," she said. "That is what matters here. Strength is valuable, but intelligence and flexibility determine who survives." Elias felt a quiet pride. He had learned much from the predator the day before, but today he understood the true depth of teamwork with Lyra. Her guidance, observation, and skill had taught him not only survival tactics, but also the importance of thinking several steps ahead. In this environment, that could mean the difference between life and death. They pressed onward, discovering deeper chambers filled with strange artifacts, crystalline structures that pulsed with energy, holographic projections that flickered to life when touched, and murals depicting battles between beings of immense skill and intelligence. Elias studied each detail, noting how the civilization had combined strategy, technology, and physical prowess to protect their world. The lessons were clear. Adaptation, observation, and cooperation were more important than brute strength. Lyra moved ahead to a particularly complex mural, her fingers tracing symbols with care. This civilization did not survive because they were weak, she explained. They survived because they planned, observed, and controlled every variable. Their strength was not just physical, it was mental and strategic. Elias nodded, absorbing every word. He felt a kinship with these long-lost beings, understanding that their wisdom could help him navigate the perils of this death world. He also realized that Lyra embodied those same qualities, a living example of the lessons inscribed in stone. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in shades of red and gold, they discovered the central chamber of the ruins. It was vast, filled with towering columns, reflective surfaces, and a faint hum that resonated through the floor. In the center, a massive crystalline structure pulsed with energy, sending ripples of light across the walls. Elias approached cautiously, feeling the vibration through his boots. Lyra stood beside him, her presence calm but vigilant. "This is the heart of their power," she said. "It is both a weapon and a test. Only those who understand balance and control may interact with it safely." Elias studied the structure, noting the intricate patterns and energy flow. He realized that it was designed to respond to precise input, likely a combination of physical and mental skill. The challenge was clear. Any mistake could result in catastrophic consequences. With Lyra guiding him, Elias began to experiment carefully, following her subtle cues and observing the patterns of energy. Step by step, he adjusted his approach, learning to anticipate the structure's responses. The crystalline core responded, its pulses becoming steadier, brighter, and more synchronized. Each successful adjustment brought a sense of achievement, a recognition that human ingenuity combined with guidance could overcome even the most alien of challenges. Hours passed, and the chamber glowed with a steady rhythm of energy. Elias felt a quiet exhilaration, knowing they had not only survived the trials of the death world, but had also uncovered secrets of a civilization that had mastered strategy, technology, and physical skill. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly as she observed him, her posture relaxed but attentive. She had tested him, guided him, and watched him adapt, and he had proven himself capable. As night fell, Elias and Lyra made camp within the ruins, using portable shields to protect against energy fluctuations and the planet's unpredictable storms. The team settled nearby, exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time, Elias felt a profound connection to both Lyra and the ancient civilization they were uncovering. He understood that survival here required more than skill. It required intelligence, observation, trust, and courage. Before resting, Elias reflected on the journey so far. The Predator, the automated guardians, the complex ruins, they had all been tests, challenges designed to push him to his limits. And through it all, Lyra had been both guide and partner, teaching him lessons that went beyond mere survival. He realized that his initial, careless comment about her figure had been insignificant compared to the respect, admiration, and understanding that had grown between them. Lyra watched him quietly, understanding that Elias had begun to internalize the lessons of the death world. He had adapted, observed, and acted decisively. He had demonstrated courage, intelligence, and resilience, the qualities that define both survival and legend. As Elias drifted into a deep sleep, he felt a quiet determination settle in his chest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, perhaps even greater than those they had faced so far. But he also knew something vital. With Lyra's guidance and his own ingenuity, he could face them. The Death World was a harsh teacher, but it had also shown him the value of trust, observation, and courage. And in the heart of the ruins, he felt a spark of understanding that would guide him through every trial to come. Above him, Lyra stood silently, her glowing eyes scanning the horizon. She had seen potential, courage, and adaptability in this human, qualities that could endure even on a death world. She knew that the trials ahead would be greater, but for now, Elias had passed the tests. Survival, understanding, and respect had been earned. The ruins hummed softly around them, alive with the energy of a civilization long gone but not forgotten. And in that moment, both human and alien understood that the story of their partnership was only beginning, a story that would test every skill, every instinct, and every decision as they faced the final challenges of the death world together. The first light of dawn filtered through the jagged cliffs, painting the ruins in muted gold and red. Elias woke with a sense of anticipation, his body sore but his mind sharper than ever. The last 4 days on this death world had tested every skill he possessed: survival, strategy, observation, and courage. Yet, as he looked at the massive crystalline structure in the central chamber, he understood that the greatest test still lay ahead. Lyra stood silently on a ridge above the ruins, her posture poised and alert. Her glowing eyes scanned the horizon, catching every subtle movement in the valley below. Elias admired her as always, not for appearances, but for the mastery she displayed over her body, her mind, and this planet itself. Every motion, every glance, was a lesson in precision and survival. He had learned much from her, but the final challenge would prove whether human ingenuity and alien skill could truly work in harmony. Elias, she called, her voice calm but commanding, the heart of these ruins hides its ultimate trial. Approach with care. Your choices now will determine if you leave this place alive or leave it forever. Elias swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. The predator, the automated guardians, and the complex puzzles of the ruins had all been preparation. Now, they were approaching the final test, a combination of environmental danger, mental challenges, and raw physical skill. The team gathered their equipment and moved cautiously toward the central chamber. The crystalline structure pulsed softly, radiating energy that made the air hum in resonance. Elias studied the patterns of light, noticing subtle changes that seemed to correspond to their steps and actions. Lyra moved beside him, her presence a silent guide. As they entered the chamber, a sudden vibration ran through the floor. The crystalline structure reacted, sending waves of energy outward. Elias felt a prickling sensation across his skin, the energy probing, testing, and responding to their presence. It was clear that this was not just a physical trial, it was a challenge that required understanding, adaptation, and precision. Observe the rhythm, Lyra instructed. The structure responds to thought, action, and balance. Every move matters. Hesitate and it will react unfavorably. Elias took a deep breath and began to analyze the pulses, noting the intervals and intensity. He adjusted his stance, timing his steps to match the flow. Lyra mirrored him, her movements graceful and precise, creating a rhythm they could both follow. The energy pulses responded favorably, glowing brighter with each successful adjustment. Suddenly, the chamber shifted. Sections of the floor rose and fell, creating narrow platforms suspended above deep chasms. The energy pulses accelerated, responding to their every movement. Elias realized that he was now facing a test of agility and timing, one that required complete synchronization with the structure, and with Lyra. "Focus," she said softly. "Trust your instincts, trust each other." Elias nodded. Together they moved across the shifting platforms. Every step required careful calculation. A misstep could send them plummeting into the chasm below. Yet, as he followed Lyra's guidance, he discovered something remarkable. His human instincts, combined with her alien precision, created a synergy neither of them could achieve alone. The platforms shifted faster, and the energy pulses grew more intense. Elias felt the strain on his muscles and mind, but he also felt a growing confidence. The lessons of the past days, the predator, the automated drones, the ruins puzzles, had all prepared him for this moment. He moved with purpose, anticipating changes, adjusting balance, and synchronizing perfectly with Lyra. At the far end of the chamber, a massive doorway appeared, carved with intricate symbols similar to those they had seen throughout the ruins. The crystalline structure's pulses aligned perfectly with the doorway, sending a final surge of energy toward Elias and Lyra. He reached out, feeling the vibrations through his hands as he touched the carvings. The energy flowed into him, not painfully but as a current of understanding. He realized that the civilization had designed this trial not just to test strength, but to impart wisdom. Survival required observation, courage, intelligence, and trust in others. Lyra stood beside him, her glowing eyes watching his every reaction. "You have learned well," she said. "The trials were not just tests, they were lessons. You understand now what it means to survive here and beyond. You are ready." As the energy pulses subsided, the doorway slowly opened, revealing a chamber filled with artifacts, knowledge, and technology beyond anything Elias had ever imagined. Holographic projections floated in the air, displaying scenes of the civilization's triumphs, failures, and discoveries. Crystals resonated with energy that could power entire cities, and strange devices hinted at technology that bridged biology and mechanics. The team stepped forward cautiously, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what they had uncovered. Elias felt a deep sense of accomplishment. They had survived, adapted, and understood the trials of the death world. But more importantly, he felt a connection to something greater, the wisdom of a long-lost civilization and the partnership with Lyra that had enabled him to succeed. Lyra approached him, her voice calm but firm. "The knowledge here is a gift, not a prize. Use it wisely. The death world will continue to test those who enter, and many will fail without understanding these lessons." Elias nodded, realizing the truth in her words. This was not about glory or conquest. It was about growth, adaptation, and respect for the dangers and wisdom of the galaxy. As they explored the chamber, Elias discovered a device that allowed communication across vast distances. Images of planets, life forms, and civilizations flashed before him. He understood that this civilization had once guided others, sharing knowledge with those capable of surviving their tests. He felt a sense of awe. The possibilities were endless. Humanity could learn, adapt, and thrive in ways that others had not imagined. Lyra stood silently beside him, observing his reactions. Elias realized that she had watched him not just to test him, but to guide him toward understanding. Her judgment had been precise, her lessons subtle, and her guidance invaluable. He felt a deep respect for her, and for the partnership that had grown between them. As the day wore on, they gathered the team and prepared to leave the central chamber. Elias felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had survived the death world, faced predators, navigated automated defenses, and deciphered the puzzles of a lost civilization. But most importantly, they had learned the value of trust, observation, intelligence, and courage. Outside, the valley was bathed in the warm glow of the twin suns. The wind swept across the cliffs, carrying the scent of minerals and life. Elias felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had faced a world designed to destroy him, and he had not only survived, he had thrived. Lyra turned to him, her glowing eyes meeting his. "You have grown," she said, "not just in skill but in understanding. The death world is harsh, but it has revealed your potential. You are ready for greater challenges." Elias nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. He had learned much from her, from the planet, and from the ruins. He realized that human ingenuity, combined with courage and adaptability, could overcome even the most impossible challenges. And with allies like Lyra, humans could thrive in worlds that others feared. As they made their way back toward the expedition ship, Elias looked back at the ruins one last time. The crystalline structure pulsed softly, as if acknowledging their success. The energy of the civilization, the lessons of the planet, and the partnership they had forged would stay with him forever. The journey had been long, dangerous, and exhausting, but Elias knew that it had transformed him. He was no longer just a human exploring a death world. He was a survivor, a learner, and a partner in a story that spanned species, planets, and generations. Lyra walked beside him, her presence both reassuring and inspiring. He realized that the connection they had formed went beyond survival. It was mutual respect, understanding, and trust. In a galaxy filled with danger, these qualities were more valuable than any weapon or tool. As the expedition ship lifted off the planet, Elias looked down at the jagged cliffs, the glowing plants, and the ruins that had tested him so thoroughly. He felt a sense of gratitude, not just for the discoveries but for the lessons, the challenges, and the partnership that had guided him through them. The death world faded beneath them, but its impact remained. Elias understood now that survival was not about strength alone. It was about intelligence, observation, courage, and the willingness to learn. And in the partnership between human and alien, he saw a future where these qualities could reshape the galaxy. Lyra stood quietly beside him on the ship's observation deck. Elias glanced at her, and for a moment their eyes met. No words were necessary. They had faced the impossible together, survived, and learned from it. The story of their journey would become a legend, not just of survival, but of the power of understanding, trust, and human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. As the ship soared into space, leaving the death world behind, Elias felt a quiet satisfaction. The trials had ended, but the lessons would remain. The galaxy was vast, full of danger and mystery, but with courage, intelligence, and allies like Lyra, humanity could thrive anywhere, even on worlds designed to kill. And in that moment, Elias knew that this was only the beginning. The story of survival, understanding, and the partnership between human and alien would continue, spreading across stars and inspiring generations to come. The death world had tested him, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever the galaxy held next. And Lyra, ever watchful, had silently confirmed what he now understood. The true measure of survival was not just strength. It was the courage to face the impossible, the intelligence to understand it, and the heart to persevere. Together, they had become a legend.